Hello and welcome, my name's Amy, aka Warpfiend, and in this video I'm going to be making some Genestealer Cults themed 40k scenery. So Autumn Witch has once more been pushing the idea of these MDF disc scenery videos. If you watched our earlier videos, you know we did a coaster terrain challenge early on. Well, now we have some much larger discs. We're going to play around with them, and I had the idea of making this little Genestealer Cult Outpost on mine. The recent Genestealer Cult releases have really been tempting me, and while I haven't splashed out on any minis yet, I was inspired to make something for the army. I have a rough idea in my head of what I want to achieve, an amalgamation of some standard imperial scenery with some roughly constructed wooden sheds to create something that feels lived in. When building terrain, it's handy to think of the different stages of construction as layers. For instance, say you have a brand new STC designed imperial building. Over the years it's going to take some damage from wars, natural disasters and the like. Over the course of time, old parts of the building get taken away, new parts get added on, and what you end up with is a real lived-in building with multiple strata of construction. Wooden huts might get added to it by cultists without access to heavy construction resources. Metal sheets get piled against a wall, holes get repaired with hastily welded panels, and at all these stages various layers of dust, grease, paint and general detritus is going to be building up. To replicate this organic process, I'm going to shove together a bunch of kits. First off, I'm going to start with some Games Workshop scenery as the base to ground it in 40k. I've got lots of bits and pieces, but I end up mostly using the Zone Mortalis kit with a couple of pieces from Sector Mechanicus. Next, I have this fantastic Dead Man's Hand Wild West themed terrain from Great Escape Games. Some beautiful wooden walkways, steps and railings that are going to help provide an extra layer of realism. Along with that, this lovely wooden hut by Renadra Scenics that I picked up from Bad Squiddo. I'll link all the kits I used in the description if you want to pick them up. The other main part of this is going to be these Tyrannid growths that Autumn Witch printed for me, which I'm sure you can hunt down on Cults 3D. Since I don't actually have any actual Genestealer Cults bits, these are going to do a lot of the legwork in selling this piece as being a cult outpost. Maybe these are sprouting by the will of the Patriarch as the Genestealer infection spreads. The next part of the project is a little trickier to follow along with, as I'm going to spend a lot of time trying out some different pieces until I start to get a feel for how it's going to come together. I didn't plan this, so it's very much a spontaneous process of creation here. My original idea was a little shrine tucked in at the base of a hive city, but I just didn't have the pieces to create something truly multi-layer with various catwalks and the like above it. I'm just involved in this kind of little dialogue here between my ideas and the materials to hand that's going to result in a piece that won't look exactly as I imagined, but will hopefully end up with something that captures the spirit of my idea. My initial attempts revolved around this wall in a wider city, including this big blast door. The shed would be tucked up against the side of the wall. The trouble with this is that the disc that I'm using lends itself particularly well to a freestanding piece of terrain. You know, it's round, so I couldn't easily slot it into a larger city, and you'd have to work out what you're going to do with the cross-section of wall that would kind of connect up to the city. And you know, there's going to be an angle that doesn't look as good because it cuts off. For these reasons, I just built a little tower with a section of wall beside it. This will do to represent maybe an access point to an underground facility that has become the lair of this cult. The cultists have expanded it with some ramshackle additions since they've moved in, with the wooden hut hastily built on the side of the outpost and filled with bizarre machinery incorporating this Tyrannid skull. So at this point I want to talk a little more abstractly about composition and purpose. I'm making this scenery for a dual purpose, partially as a piece of gaming terrain, but largely as a backdrop I can use for filming and photographing minis on. I'm currently working on getting a dedicated area together for filming my beauty shots. As you'll know if you've seen any of my other vids, I've been clearing a space in my messy painting area to do my photography, and I'm working to set up something more permanent and professional. I've been super inspired by the fantastic scenic shots that Annie from Bad Squiddo has been taking recently, so I want to be able to do similar things myself, as well as perfect the cinematic, music video-esque quality I've been playing around with for my little beauty shot compilations at the end of these things. So my main functional rules for building this are the following. First off, it needs to have lots of flat spaces at different height levels, so I can place minis in lots of different locations. Second, it needs multiple points of interest, so I can reuse it from various angles and create some nice interactions with minis, but not too intricate or well painted that it distracts from the minis themselves. You can see I eventually construct the piece following these two rules. We have plenty of wide flat platforms that models can sit on. You have different details like the tower, the servo skull with the weird tyrannid carapace, the embedded skull inside the shack. All of these are going to make some great backdrops to photos. When it comes to painting scenery, I'm a big fan of the quick and easy grimdark method of just splashing everything on there. This is a bit of a contrast to my actual models, where I rarely do grimdark. I think the difference between kind of my largely fancy realism inspired painting style and the more realistic, messy grimdark of the backdrop will really help foreground any minis that I use on this. I'm going to paint everything with just some super rough dry brushing, then tie everything together in the weathering stage. First off, one heavy dark green oil wash over everything. It's quite a large surface for an oil wash, but I do really like the way it dries and the ability to clean up areas afterwards, as opposed to just a basic wash with some paint and water. After the oil wash, I come in with some of the dirty down effects. First off, giving the metal parts a heavy but random coat of this rust effect. Not being too careful about where my brush travels. I'm going to bring that down a bit with some water brushed on afterwards to create a nice mix of these thick orange and brown rust deposits. I'm out of the moss effect, so I tried to use some of their verdigris paint to represent moss on these wooden planks. In the end it looks a bit less like moss and more like some spilled paint or chemicals staining the wood surfaces, which that also works. It's fun to experiment with stuff like this. To a large extent, it really doesn't matter what weathering you apply to a piece like this, just that you apply enough and randomly spread around. After those effects were done, I'm going to finish off the whole piece with some weathering powders in grey and tan. To really get the feel there's dust everywhere that's been ground into every surface over the years, I'm going to go super heavy, and then I'm going to fix it all down to prevent it getting all over the models I'm photographing on it. So I'll cut to the beauty shots in a minute, but before I do, I just want to let people know to keep their eyes peeled for more of these kind of scenery vids on the channel. Autumn Witch is going to be releasing another MDF disc based one soon, and I need some more varieties of scenery for my new photography area. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this kind of more process oriented video where I'm less giving a step-by-step guide and more explaining the general principles that are guiding my workflow. Don't forget, I've linked most of the pieces that I use down in the description, where you can also find our Coffee, Discord and Facebook links, among others. This has been Warpfiend for Bleeding Tree Gaming, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye!